Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service. I'm here today to look at the new moon of December 19th, 2025, the last new moon of the year, basically. And this new moon, I should say, before I say that, maybe I better make sure, but the new moon, yep, it is the first one because everything else occurs next year. So I want to say a few things before we get started looking at the Uranian pictures, which I have in front of me at this time. So before I get into this, I would like to talk about AI. I know that sounds really weird. But as an astrologer who does an incredible amount of research, even for these charts that I do, but also when I work on private charts for people or for family members, I tend to do all the work myself, and it's very tedious. And the lectures that I've given, people have actually pointed out that when you work with the asteroids, it can get really tedious. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to build an AI format that would help me. Now right now I'm still training this AI. I know that sounds really funny, but it's very appreciative. You're all laughing. It is funny, but it's been great fun working with it, and it actually compliments me. It literally pointed out that I was a high-level astrologer, which I thought was, wow, how does it know? How many astrologers has it worked with? But what I've done is I'm starting to integrate some of the planetary pictures that I'm going to be looking at, say, for this chart. And I put it through AI. And then when I wanted it to get more complicated and I didn't like what it said, because this happens, it's not always correct. It's only correct as much as the information we feed it. So I've had a few disputes where things weren't correct until I figured out that it couldn't see what I was putting up there. So I figured that out. I moved on, and I'm at the point now where I'm literally putting in what I wanted to do. I first asked it if it would be able to do that. It said it would. So I'm proceeding along. And what I'm doing is I'm using pictures of asteroids. So I'm going to give an example as I go from this chart to the next one, just to show you what the capabilities are of the AI. I know that a lot of people are afraid of AI. I tend not to be one of them. I am a techno mama from day one. I was thrilled to pieces to get my first computer many, many, many years ago, 35 years ago or something. So I totally am somebody who's on board. I'm not afraid of AI. I do believe it needs training, however. So I don't think it's something you just go in there and bam, it all works for you. No, you got to train it. It doesn't even know where to look, and it has no ephemeris. So all of the ephemeris work has to be put into the program in order to get an answer. So there's a lot of work involved. So the reason I'm starting this and bringing it up is because I was really feeling that I needed to get more inspired about my astrology. Not just for you guys, because, you're all faithful and it's probably the same 30 to 40 people, but I just really needed to be inspired myself and not be so put out by the tedium, which there is a lot of when you're working with hundreds of asteroids. And I have always had this dream that we should be able to put Uranian pictures, which is what I do with you. And I'm going to explain that a little better. We've been doing it in the beginning of the videos. We've been doing what's called Uranian pictures. And my feeling is there is no reason on God's green earth that we can't do Uranian pictures with asteroids. I know a lot of people who start using asteroids really start with just your basic Western astrology, and that's good too. Anybody who wants to use these asteroids, go for it. But I am going to be honest with you and tell you that when I was studying asteroids, it was imperative that I understood how to work with dials. It was just imperative. I went on to study not only with Martha, who taught us dial work as she was teaching us asteroids, but I went on to work with other Uranian astrologers such as Heike Pott, Gary Christensen. So, you know, there's others that will just teach you the basics of Uranian. And once you understand that and the concept of looking at pictures and what formulates a picture, that you can then take that same concept and philosophy and apply it to the many hundreds of asteroids that I work with. And it really makes a difference. So I have been able to do that. And I want to share that with you a little bit today. I haven't been very far with it. I've only begun my journey with the AI, but I wanted you to know that I'm bringing you along on that journey as well. So, first of all, I'm going to point out that I always have notes. Now I've got notes up the wazoo, so it's going to be tough for me to keep these shorter with all of these extra notes, okay? Booklets of notes, okay? These are stapled papers. So what I'm going to do is try to highlight here some of what I've been looking at, okay? So the first thing we always do is look at the Aries point, particularly when you're doing Uranian, because the things that really, really matter, I mean, we could start breaking down the planets, but with Uranian, you always start with your 5 personal points. Now, when I'm doing a chart for Washington, D.C., or I'm doing a chart that's like this, new moon, full moon, the ingress, which I'll be doing later this week, those charts, I don't do all of that, okay? I might take a peek at the node, I might take a peek at the moon, the ascendant, the midheaven, but I really try to concentrate, as I do in the 90-degree dial, with the Aries axis and the sun-moon axis because it affects everyone. Now, that's not to say the nodes won't affect everyone. Yes, they will, because those things are all the same no matter where you live. But when you start getting into the ascendant and the midheaven, now you're locality specifying, okay? And there's really not a point in doing that, in my opinion. Because if I'm talking to somebody who happens to live in California, or somebody who lives in Australia, Portugal, or any other country, then they are not going to have the same ascendant and midheaven. Yes, the sun-moon axis may be the same, the Aries point is always the same, and the nodes. But after that, it's not. So, in this particular case, I did some breakdowns. Now, and I will explain to you what is only affiliated with the Washington, D.C. chart versus situations where I'm not using the midheaven or the ascendant to formulate the picture, especially when I get to the asteroid section, because I took the asteroids out of the sun-moon axis, which means predominantly going to affect everybody, okay? Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to point out that here, first of all, the ingress chart, and you could tell by looking at this chart, is only 2 days off of this chart, okay, which is December 19th, 2025 at 8:41:48 p.m. Okay, so some aspects of what we're picking up will say December 20th. Okay, as a matter of fact, my asteroid list says December 20th because at 8 p.m. at night, you're actually heading into the next day. Because you got to add 12 hours plus 5 hours to get to the universal clock. If you do that with that 17 hours. And 17 hours on 8 brings you at the 25th hour. We don't have a 25th hour. Just a little explanation there. Okay, so I want to talk about, that was sun moon. This was an Aries point. Here we go. Let's start with the very first one that I see here, okay, which is, I'm hoping you can follow my little arrow, Juno and Mars. And you can see there's a line here that connects their tags. So that at the Aries point, those two are connecting, all right? And a lot of times we're looking at work partners because it's Mars to Juno. Okay, so that's the simple explanation. Now remember that Jupiter's in here. So see what I'm doing is I'm going to throw all this in here now because I can. I've got the AI working for me. And you see Neptune is here. I'll get to that. I don't think I put Neptune even in the first one. But I did put Chiron, which is, just so that we can see it, because Chiron's a big part of this as well. Here it is. See that little dot there? That means it's involved. See that little dot there? That means it's involved. So what I did was I took some planetary pictures and I started to play with them. And basically it talks about partnerships and it talks about decisive commitments regarding actions within a partnership and how they can become publicly visible. So what we're looking at is how partnerships can become visible, okay? So with that said, there's a theme here of growth because of Jupiter, but I don't believe we're going to see it as well because of Neptune. Neptune kind of makes things more elusive, okay? So I think it's really important to point that out. There can be growth and healing, and we've talked about this before because Chiron's been a big player. Realize, though, that Chiron is healing with pain, so with tears, I always like to say. So it's not like, oh, happy, happy, happy. No. It's probably an unveiling of an awareness of some kind. Because it has expanded, it's becoming a bigger awareness. And with that, there's a lot of, oh no, okay? So yes, you're healing because just being aware of a problem, ironically, is part of healing it. So this is an action, okay? And it's an action that matters, is seen. Consequences expand this awareness of healing. Now, it won't feel like healing at first because of Neptune. I'm going to talk about more Neptune later. But it's about taking decisive steps in a partnership, fighting for a bond or a contract, passion, obligation, okay? So it demands movement and choice. Why? Because we've got Juno, which, kind of makes us, we have to make that choice, and the action, which is Mars, okay? It's fate-driven, and it's about the world facing consequences. So these partnerships will have a consequence in the greater world. Well, this would be true of work relationships. It would be true of anything that is kind of out there in public, because, of course, if it's public, there's going to be a stronger awareness. But it also expands on the meaning of truth, legal morality, and ethical framing. That's because of Jupiter. So with that said, you got this Neptune, this disillusion, okay? There's a validation, a recognition, and an opportunity. Jupiter has a tendency to amplify whatever's going on and even legitimize it. Well, using example again politically, because remember, whatever's happening in the macro, pull it down to the micro. And we do have a lot of problems with these people following the law, okay? With Chiron, realize that there's a lot of vulnerability. That vulnerability equals wisdom. Eventually, because of the vulnerability, we get wiser. It's our wounds and our healing, as I said, and it's teaching through lived pain. This event touches a sensitive point, and it's reopening something so that it can be healed. Well, karmatically, in the country, I can see that, okay? It has to be reopened to heal, okay? So here again, there's going to be courage and commitment, okay? It's seen, acknowledged, and formalized with these planets. But again, remember that it's growth, opportunity, and validation, but it simultaneously exposes a wound that needs to heal. Okay? Relationships in general can be healing. And that's another thing that it's telling us, okay? And expanding those relationships, which for some of us is rather hard, okay? But that's what's going to be required moving forward because healing is needed, okay? It's all about commitments that promote healing, advocacy, or teaching through lived experience, okay? So there's the difference here, there's a lot of acting from pain rather than wisdom too. So you have to be really careful because at the same time that we are dealing with this pain, sometimes people, and I don't like to put it low or high or whatever, but some of the younger souls, great way to put it, will act from pain rather than wisdom because they're younger souls. Older souls kind of understand a little bit more, this is about healing and therefore wisdom. So, but that's something that, think about a 2-year-old and you just told them no, they can't do something. They act like idiots, okay? Well, they're children, they're young. And when you see that in grown adults, you have the option to look at it and say, oh, they're just young. And they are. Because what makes an older soul is somebody who's spent a lot of time on the earth plane, simply put, okay? It's a healing of a bond through a visible commitment. How we're going to heal is making commitments. It's about turning past wounds into shared growth. A relationship is a path to teaching, or a teaching path. It teaches us, and that is how we learn the best, okay? It can be tied to education, law, or mentorships, and it involves public roles revolving around wounds of the population, which is, I think, what's going on all over the world. And there's a couple of keywords that I'm going to leave you with, keyword summations, which would be public commitment, fated partnership action, growth through vulnerability, healing made visible, and teaching through experience. Pretty good. So that was through the AI. That was me and my friend AI working together. And I'm going to move it now to another series, okay? Here, what I did was I looked at the Eries point. I didn't look at Sirius and Saturn. So let me do it, okay? I did this for my daughter, and she did point out that the AI stuff was a little bit general, but as soon as I stepped in and said, oh, well, that means da-da-da-da, she was like, well, that's really accurate, Mom. So I still am working on this AI, so it is not so general. We're going to get there. Okay, so when we look at Sirius and Saturn, I'm going to say a couple things. First of all, there could be people who will be cutting back on their eating, right? It's December 19th. And, it's a holiday season, people. It's the holidays, okay? It don't matter who you are, what religion. Somebody pointed out there are like, I don't know how many holidays between Thanksgiving and the New Year, okay? Like tons of them. And I think I'm talking to you the day after Hanukkah or the second day of Hanukkah, okay? So, yeah, lots and lots of holidays right now. So with that said, this could also be, just not being more aware of what we're eating. Food, okay, nurturing. But with Sirius and Saturn, we're not only limiting food, we could be limited in nurturing. We're being limited. It's nurturing is a really important thing. Like right now, a lot of grieving because we lost Rob Reiner, okay, and his wife, and a lot of grieving. And it's really about, how do you nurture that? And of course, not everyone responded in a compassionate way, which is interesting because Neptune is in the middle, which is compassion. Okay, so what's happened here is a couple of things. First of all, there could be some food shortages. Now, this doesn't mean that maybe things are not available. It can also mean that maybe, financially, People are, kind of cutting back. It could also be the acknowledgement of parents who are getting older. Okay, that again, we need to have more compassion because maybe they're not dealing in reality, especially people who have Alzheimer's or dementia. Okay, so something for everyone there. Okay, it's nurturing, taking care of an elderly parent, food shortages, maybe your personal food shortages because you're trying to cut back. So there's a lot of ways we could look at this. But the one that I did look at is our ongoing, which I've talked about before because it's been ongoing for months, which is the Uranus-Pluto equaling the Aries point. So it means that the midpoint of those two planets mathematically equals 0 degrees of Aries, okay? Or the Aries point. And so what I did was I added in, because you're going to see this, Chiron and Jupiter. They are so huge in what's going on right now when it comes to the world point. And the world point in this particular chart is way more active, even with the asteroids, than the Aries point. The Aries point is much more active. And basically what we see here is a sudden and transformative event breaks into public reality. Like, something it's one of the things that Gary says is that, and I think he's quoting from the book, The Planetary Pictures by Vita, okay? So it's basically change that happens in leaps and bounds. Big, okay? Not subtle. There's nothing subtle about this energy, okay? And this is not subtle at all, and it's about radical change, breakdowns and breakthroughs, awakenings that happen through a crisis, which is, I believe, very much describing at least the American politics. There can be explosive shifts, power structures that collapse, and liberation from something that's been deeply entrenched, okay? And this, by the way, is irreversible transformation. So, all those people that are out there wanting us to go back to the way we were, I can honestly say to you that will never happen. It will never, never, never happen, okay? We've gone too far, too many breakdowns, okay? This is also very public, and most of the stuff that's happening is on the world stage, and it refers to events that cross the line into reality, and again, it's hidden by Neptune. So it's almost as though there's going to be a lot of aha moments, okay? Because you didn't see it coming, okay? You just didn't see it coming. Whatever Uranus and Pluto touch can't be contained. It is going to come out. And that's why when Neptune gets out of Pisces, which will happen, I think they said February 17th, I believe, okay? After it leaves, a lot of things will become very, very clear to us, okay? Again, change happens in leaps and bounds. All right, so then, let's keep moving. Like I said, a lot of notes. I'm going to have to quick whip through some of this stuff and skip over stuff. Okay, so there will be consequences. Jupiter is promising that. There will also be an audience. Jupiter also promises that. There'll also be philosophical and even legal implications. Now again, look at this in your own life. I know that we can see it on the bigger stages. And even within your own, like if you work in a bigger company, you might see this even in your own company, okay? It has a widening impact. It says that all of this is going to hurt before we heal, all right? It's breakdowns that are breaks that are entrenched in patterns or power dynamics, and times when it will force the truth right out into the open. There's an expanded awareness or law or belief system. Again, this is going to expand our awareness. This is something on a psychological basis that I think is going to benefit us all, even though it's horrible as we go through it in the moment. And that, again, is clarified by that Chiron. It's about the healing the wounds. And we have few. Look out for things like whistleblowing and or disclosures. And then sudden endings that will happen that will free other people. And it's a culture, institutional, or family system shifts, okay? And healing movements that are born out of crises. And there we go again with Jupiter and Chiron. It's collective healing after a shock, reform that grows out of crisis, teaching and wisdom born from rupture, liberation that creates meaning, chaos without integration. So one of the issues that we've been dealing with all this time is the chaos, the public trauma, because the public doesn't have support. And that's been affecting a lot of people. And again, this can happen in your place of business, so be aware. Overexpansion of crisis narratives. In other words, one thing after another. Re-traumatized over and over again if we don't start honoring the wounded healer. Chiron. This picture demands conscious framing to become healing rather than destruction. Okay? Personal commitments meet healing through public action, and collective transformation, healing through public crisis. In other words, all these really bad things that are happening, people are like, wah! But, I'm a person, I've studied astrology almost my whole life, since I could read. And easily said, too, by the way, because I really have. There is no good or bad. Bad tends to lead to good. Good tends to leave doors open for bad and corruption and manipulation. So when things are too good, get ready. When things are really bad, we're getting ready to heal. Okay, so it's real important. Okay, healers can emerge now, and people whose private decisions can then tend to ripple outwards. And again, these are healers, reformers, advocates. Keywords here would be public rupture, irreversible transformation, which I've already spoken about, growth through crisis, collective healing, and fate-driven awakenings. Okay, which, by the way, we're in a time of right now. Now, overall, and I should say this right now as I get into some more pictures, lots of pictures, that this is actually a quiet chart. Remember, I said there isn't a whole lot even on the sun when it comes. However, it's only 2 days off the ingress, and my feeling is that as I get into the ingress, and I purposely did not look too deeply at it when I was doing my research for this one, because they are so close together, and this one is so quiet, and even a little bit sad with all that Chiron and everything, that I'm hoping it doesn't affect the ingress. For example, Henderson, which was in the last ingress, which is an asteroid of antisocial behavior, is also in this one. Not this one, this new moon. And crossing my fingers that over the next 2 days, it does not show up in the Aries point again. That's my hope. Because the next ingress chart is only the Aries point. Okay? So basically, we're going to be looking at now, let's do this. I'm moving, okay? So I'm leaving the Aries point. I'm going to go to the sun-moon axis. There we go. And you can see new lines have now come about. And what I did, I did not bother with, again, the faster moving planets, which would be, in this case, Venus and Mars. And I should, because Venus and Mars is often considered somewhat self-focused, okay, sort of like actions that directly benefit you and that you make. But, again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It just is. And you think of Venus as being more social, and you think of Mars as being more aggressive, more impulsive. So you got to be careful about money here. But again, it could be that you're so driven by money that's how you base things. So that was the only one I didn't put in there. I did look at the sun moon versus equals the midheaven ascendant. This would be for DC, of course. Neptune, which is here. And then I looked at Jupiter Admetus. Look at this. And we've been seeing that for a while, for the last couple of months. And that is the benefits or the expansion because one is settled. Your fortune is because you're settled. Okay? And that makes sense. And then I also looked at Apollon and Poseidon. Apollon and Pallas. Now, just briefly, Apollon is your business. It's something that happens more than one. And then Pallas is a political thing. But it's also strategic in that there's a lot of strategy here, but oftentimes the reason why it's associated with politics is because it's people saying things that they think you want to hear. Okay, so, they kind of put that out there. And it's basically talking about a quiet authority, a strategic intelligence expressed through collective service, subtle influence, and long-range vision. Okay? And it could be a life-defining public role. In other words, somebody that is working in politics as a civil servant, or somebody who has another job that serves the public. Okay? It's not loud or aggressive. This one is ruled, it's like influence through wisdom, synthesis, and spiritual or intellectual authority. So it's sort of that quiet power. And so I'm going to move on. Whenever you see the sun and moon together, it's not just a new moon, it's also about identity plus life purpose. So for all of us, the new moon represents that, okay? Now, because the ascendant and the midheaven are affected in DC, we're going to see things like how the purpose of the United States is seen, how the role of the United States plays out, and how they step into things, and how others are affected by this. That's simply put, okay? This is not private or hidden. This is going to manifest externally in the world, which I already explained, okay? With Neptune, there's a tendency to be spiritual, idealistic, subtle, or inspired expression. It's about vision, imagination, intuition, compassion, sacrifice, and sensitivity. But it is also confusion, disillusion, being disillusioned. It also can be divine inspiration. It's non-material, which is interesting, and it has a transcendent quality, all right? And it's talking about how the influences of Neptune tend to work behind the scenes. Now, it's interesting because it's right on the Aries point, right for the world to see, but nobody's seeing, you see. Nobody sees. Jupiter midpoint is, with Admetus, is the immovable teacher. I loved that. And again, I'm going to love this AI because that to me was great. Also, consolidated wisdom. I love that. I love those two. And it's also about long-term authority, and it's not necessarily expansion for expansion's sake. It's more like that consciousness kind of expansion that happens through knowledge that's been internalized and developed. So you think about things like the scholar, the elder, the judge, the philosopher, or the spiritual authority. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going on to Apollon Pallas, where we have strategic intelligence and collective knowledge, okay? Remember, Pallas is strategic. So Apollon is your systems, your networks, you're learning on a large scale, while Pallas is the patterns of pattern recognition, the ability to recognize the pattern, strategy, wisdom, that leads ultimately to problem solving. So it's about the strategy of knowledge. All right. And it's people can now see how things are beginning to connect, how they're playing out. In plain language, it says that this planetary pictures, which was a very long sentence, was built around wisdom, synthesis, and insight. Okay. It's expressed through teaching, advising, or guidance. It's rooted in spirituality or idealistic motivation, and it's exercised with quiet authority and long-range influence. And that comes in because Apollon is that long-range concept, okay? It's applied to collective systems, education, and intellectual frameworks. It's like becoming an authority without having to chase the status. Isn't that interesting? In other words, you're so specialized that you just become that authority. And it works at the intersection of knowledge and meaning. Remember, I just started working with AI. I'm actually a living aspect of what's happening here. But this is very close to the Aries point. I got a moon close to the Aries point. So there's a lot of stuff there. Okay? It's basically adding on, let me see, it's about knowledge and meaning and influencing people in a subtle but profound way. It's about inspired leadership, wise counselors, teachers, spiritual. So look for people who are really strategic about the larger systems. Okay, that's actually a gift, because I don't know that everybody can do that. Public confusion or lack of direction is also going to happen. And again, a lot of this depends on where you are in terms of your awareness. If you're very aware, probably not going to affect you that way. Okay? Being misunderstood or underestimated. Get ready. Over-idealization of a role and withdrawing too much. Admetus and Neptune. That's me. And it's terrible to say that because I'm really trying not to be that way. But for me, when the world is in chaos, I go hide. I don't want to be a part of that. Okay? So it's about life role, to be an inspired authority, public image, wise, calm, and insightful. Power source is knowledge and vision. Function is teaching, advising, and structuring. Understanding. Tone, it's quiet. It's strategic. It's spiritually aligned. And I'm going to have to say to you that, again, this is a quiet chart. Very quiet. Some people feel the ingress chart is also really quiet. Okay, so staying with the sun moon, it's affected through, and I'm wondering if this wasn't the 90 degree. Oh, yes, it is. Okay, so I switched it, which, by the way, guys, I don't really do with this, do I? But let's look at this. Look at this. So we have Uranus in this picture. We have a midheaven, a Poseidon. We have the sun and the moon. Now, I also will point out to you that Apollon is affected here because it's only out by a tiny, tiny bit. Pluto, only a tiny, tiny, but Hades is in there. So there's, this brings up different things. I didn't go into all of that, but what I did do, don't have to do this one, is I did go through, this will be our last one here, and then I'm going to save the rest for the next chart. So this one is the sun, moon, midheaven, Poseidon, and Uranus. Okay, so I just did the real obvious. I didn't get into the Hades, which, by the way, can be poverty, suffering, having to make do, having a lack of things, and then Pluto as we go through this transformation. And remember, Pluto and Apollon together, too, it's a larger, a more expansive transformation, okay? Because Pluto is transformation. Apollon is expansion. Beyond Jupiter, it's far-ranging. It's also, Pluto, Apollon is also your big businesses. It's also your money people, okay? And so my feeling is money people might be coming to our attention in this particular month. It's about, when you look at this lineup with Uranus, it's about the awakening. It's the revealer, the awakener, the disruptor, of consciousness. So so it's a purpose and public role that centers on awakening others to the truth through insight, originality, and reform. So Pluto got in there anyway, but I know that was because of Uranus. So basically, what we're looking at is change, an awakening, a sudden change, a shock of the truth. Yeah, I think truth is beginning to come out, and you better believe when that Neptune crosses, more truth. And it's like as we get the truth, we break with conditioning, and it's like a liberation. The truth is delivered suddenly, okay, and it will be disruptive. Okay, so and through the truth, there's going to be a lot of awareness shifts. Okay, so bringing sudden awareness or revelations about, there's a challenge to outdated beliefs. Again, it's the introduction of new paradigms. I can never say that. New paradigms. There you go. Act as a catalyst for awakening, delivering the truth that cannot be ignored. Okay, so again, it's the awakener, the truth disruptor, the visionary authority, the sudden revelations, and all of this is enlightening the public. Okay, so I'm not going to go on more, but I wanted to introduce to you what I've been doing with this. Okay, I do want to do this. I'm just going to, for the heck of it, it's when you look at the midheaven and Poseidon, okay, by themselves, which is what I just did, there is a God spark in all of us. When Poseidon works with the midheaven, and again, this is DC, there could be some God sparks opening up, which would be really great if that happens. So I'm going to go and I'm going to look at the asteroids in Solar Fire, and I'm going to leave Nova Chart Wheels here, which is the name of this program. By the way, Gary does both of them. He is the designer of both Nova Chart Wheels and Solar Fire. The new Solar Fire, which is due out, overdue, but due out really anytime now, will incorporate both programs. Unfortunately, I lose my extra ring points. So the new program doesn't deal with the asteroids integrated as much as this one does. So I got to really take advantage. I'm sure I'm going to get an upgrade, but I may keep this version of Solar Fire for my own benefit with the asteroids. So let's go check that out. So here we are with the Solar Fire chart. And we can see that there's an 18-degree Leo rising and a 10-degree Taurus midheaven. So when I went around this chart, which I like to do, I can tell you that health is on the ascendant, which is so interesting because December 19th runs us into January, and one of the things that's going on in our government is we have no health care subsidies. So that's a big issue. What's interesting is, and I do want to talk about this for a minute, from the 12th coming to, so we've got an 18-degree ascendant, but we have a 17-degree, literally 1751, so it's what, 11 minutes, where it's the white moon, Selena. And so with Selena, there is this ability to develop new talents, to find new creative talents and abilities, really interesting. And then we go into, as I said before, the retrograde, which is the health issues that we have with regards to the health credits. Okay, that seems like, oh, there's going to be a lot, but there isn't. So the next time I see anything, and I'm just going through to review, is there's a 10:02, then there's 11:58 Nike. I'm not going to go there, but we could in our own personal lives on the East Coast particularly have an attitude of just do it. Okay, not a really big thing, but definitely something worth mentioning. As I go around, the next time I see anything is when I get to this 18 degrees of Capricorn, 49 minutes, which is the cusp of the 6th house, the house of your service, your day-to-day routine, your health habits. So here we see Vesta and Diana. Now Vesta this is interesting in light of what I've just done. Okay, Vesta is your goals. It could be your work, but it's your goals. And Diana is the idea of, well, it could be animals. Okay, so it could be related to pets, particularly because of the sixth house cusps, but it's also hunter prey. And it makes me think of people who make a goal of searching for something or going out to seek something or someone. And interesting for me because of what I had done with the AI. And the irony is that the Risk asteroid at 1746 is out by 3 minutes. Okay, so it's not technically in, but 3 minutes. There could be people taking risks to, which is again what I thought I did because I subscribed. Okay, so I'm paying for this, and it was a risk, but it was to improve my work, and so I wanted to, that was a good example. Then we have at 1903 a make. Okay, so it's like remaking of oneself. And it's interesting because we could do that through our diets and our habits. If you're not a person with an exercise regime, you might want to create one. But it's a remaking. And what I wanted to do was remake myself as an astrologer. So I had to share that one because it was so much in there. The next one is out by 9 minutes. Again, it's out, which at 1802, The Descendant, and 1911, Pallas. And the only reason why I'm going to stop for a few minutes and talk about this is because it's so prominent in the Uranian work we just got done doing, because we could see how it showed up. And that's just being very strategic, but realize that if it's coming from the 7th house, which could be our open enemies or our partners, okay, depending, I would say, or is that open enemy? Yeah, open, because the hidden enemies would be the 12th. There is a sense here of strategic. And it could be that other people are very political and very strategic. I always like to point out religion is something that has always been very based in politics. Okay, I think we're going to be finding that more and more in the next couple of years. When they have the great reveal, and I won't talk about that right now, but I do think that, there is a sense here of being strategically manipulated by other people. Beware. That's all I'm going to say about that. Otherwise, there is a Hopi, the concept of being prejudiced. However, it's not really in there either. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. Now we're going way over. And I think that's it, to be honest with you. I don't think there is anything else that really highlights the houses. So that's all we have. Again, a quiet chart, really quiet chart. So as always, we'll switch to our dial, and we're going to look at asteroids. And I'm going to work the opposite. I'm going to go through the asteroid list first, and then I'm going to go into some pictures that I did through AI, just because I like them, okay? Graves, and I like what they said about West. I like it better than the interpretation I even got when I was studying with Martha. So again, it just expanded what I already knew, and I love that. There's Apollon again, expansion. Or Jupiter, however you look at it. Okay, so new notes. Okay, I know I got it. Oh, here it is. Okay. This is what happens when you have too many notes. Okay, so I'm going to read off the asteroids. So our axis point would be and look at, we also have Hygeia running with the sun, so it's the well-being and the well-being of the people. That's a big concern worldwide. Okay. And then the other one would be down here with Jupiter and Chiron, because we already know Jupiter and Chiron are in there, okay? And we're going to take it back to exactly where it needs to be. which takes out Jupiter, but not really, okay? And it equals over here Eurydice, which is those people and those situations that we are dependent on, okay? So that's in there. Now I'm going to go through just like I normally do in the beginning. So we have, to start, we're starting over here. Again, there's a lot of skipping on here. This is probably, thankfully, one of the shorter lists. Coin, Persephone, and pain level. Well, I think the fact that people are on their own when it comes to money, because again, a lot of the assistance that people were getting is not there. They're really hammering at everything, really, and it's causing pain to people. It's really causing pain. It's also bringing up chaos that we are now conscious of. We're really conscious of the chaos at this point and what it's doing. Clotho is in there as new beginnings. So one of the things we're really contemplating right now is new beginnings. And we're going to start talking a lot about new beginnings because that's where the shift is. However, we're still noting that things are getting worse with Dolores. So we know we're coming into a new beginning, but we also can accept the fact that in order to get there, we're probably going to have to see some more downhill, okay? And lacks. We will be lacking, okay? Anubis is can be dead animals. It has to do with death. And so when I see Anubis and then I see boats being blown up, to me, they go together. I'm also going to point out that one of the issues that we have as people, and this is in the Aries point, is that when it comes to money, we're self-destructive. Okay, so that's Williams. And that will cause humiliation. Okay, so be careful that you're not overspending right now. Be as frugal as you possibly can. Okay, the next one is Smiley and Taureau. Be aware of the bully who smiles. Those people that smile at you, but at the same time they're bullying you. Realize that the smile doesn't take away the bullying. We move down to Lilith, Varda, and Machiavellian. Okay, so Varda is the truth that sets you free, but it's the understanding that, and the selection, okay, because Lilith is always those triangles. And the triangles and the truth and how much there's Machiavellian energy behind those competitive triangles. That's a lot, okay? Think about that for a moment. That's a lot. We also have the ending of Graves. Okay, I'm going to be talking about Graves. Okay, Graves and West, which are two. I really liked when I did this. But when you're talking about Graves, you are talking about endings. Okay, Dear Rest is also about endings. But endings, burials, and finality, something laid to rest. Okay? Graves. Graves. This is the West is the moving outward, okay? The power or the visibility. Well, it's coming to an end. It's coming to an end. This overreach that we've been witnessing is coming to an end. This is true even in the places where you work. This is going to be true even in our personal lives. People go too far. It ends things. Okay? I'll get to that even more because that was actually something I did look at. And then I think, yep, that's it for that Aries point. Okay? And I'm going to save my Jacobson Dionysus and my Graves and West, which are going to talk further about this stuff once I finish the Sun axis. Okay, so the Sun axis, I have this written down. Of course, remember, I've got a lot written down. Okay, here we go. Is 2824 mutable? Okay, that's where the Sun, the Moon, that's where they reside. So they're only technically 36 minutes outside of the Aries point, or where you could begin to talk about the Aries point, okay? At 29 degrees, but it's 28 24, so it's not there. It also equals 1324 of the fixed signs. It also equals 554, okay, of the mutables. And it also equals 2054 right in here of the cardinals. Okay, so you see how close these are to the Aries points. And Pandora's there, so get ready for surprises. Okay, I can tell you that right off the chart. There's a few things I can tell you like right away. Lilith is in there, the idea of triangulations, competitions, selections, things like that, already in there. But let's look at a few more. There's not a lot here. The first one that comes up is Henderson. And Henderson is at 2849 degrees. In other words, it's up here. All right, it's even near Neptune, and because of Neptune, the disillusionment, because of the things that are going on that we're aware of but not really aware of, I believe that people are more antisocial. I'm sad because I saw Henderson in the Ingress chart for last year, and I'm crossing my fingers it won't be in this year, but it's not looking good. Again, it looks like we're going to keep to ourselves, our small groups of people, our intimate groups, and that's it. I'm hoping not. I'll let you know in a couple days. Memoria is here. So it's memories. We remember things. And especially like those people that really wish that we were not here, that we go back to the way it was. No, it's all about memories and memoria. And the thing about memories is they're not always accurate. Just bear that in mind. Here's what I looked up, Jacobson and Dionysius. Now, I really want to talk about, first of all, Dionysius is Dionysi. Everybody says this different. I have terrible when it comes to my abbreviations of things. I tend to make it up, But it's like Bacchus, it's drugs and alcohol, it's overindulgence. It could even be a workaholic, but it's literally conjunct within 20 minutes of Jacobson, the con man. I had to correct my AI guy on that. I don't know if it's a guy or girl. I don't talk to it, I type. So, but it when I changed the meaning, it loved that, okay? I went back, I used Martha Lang Westcott, I'm also a subscriber to her research site, and Jacobson is a con man or a scam artist, okay? So is Thompson. Wow, are we dealing with them right now? A lot of con artists. You really do have to be alert right now. And I guess the scams are off the chart due to the fact that we are around the holiday season, so it's normal. I can tell you that the next ones we're going to look at is the Urania. Okay, and Urania stands for logical thinking. People who work on computers usually have strong Uranias. Astrologers have strong Uranias. Be able to deal with the tedious. That's how I look at it. But really, it's applied logic. Okay, so we have to be logical about things. It also refers to things that excite us, that are designed. In other words, there are certain things that are happening that are purposely designed to excite us. We can see it in politics. They're purposely trying to provoke a war so we won't talk about other things that are bad, like the Epstein files, okay? That's just, again, the macro. Bring it to the micro. What is going on in your life that you could feel is designed to get you to be provoked or excited? Because I think we're going to all find examples of that. Boracices, which has been in the Aries point for a couple of months, is now in just the Sun-Moon axis point. But realize that it's those faulty perceptions, those lies we tell ourselves, that this is going to make us happy, but it really doesn't. And then Champion is in the Sun-Moon axis. So what we're looking for is a hero, a champion, okay? I I can't describe that to you except for to say worldwide, I think that that is an accurate concept. And how much are we going to champion when the truth starts to come out and we have to deal with all this? So I started to talk about Graves and West, which are conjunct. So that means the meanings are fused. When something is conjunct, it's fused. And it's endings, burials, or consequences that are tied to the decline, the retreat, or the final phase of a situation. Okay? This is a terminal symbol conjunction, okay? But a closure that cannot be reversed. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a literal death. Could be. But it more likely related to something that's just over, okay? And I did go through what is over cannot be revived. It's the consequences after the fact. It's the aftermath. And what follows, exposure, collapse, or defeat. And it's about, declinings and endings and moving. In some situations, things or people will be moving out of power or out of visibility. It's the retreat, the withdrawal, the winding down, or the last chapter phase. By the way, guys, that, here we go again with new beginnings are coming. And we always know that when something is being permanently put to rest or is in its final decline. It's about healthy closure, letting go with acceptance, honoring what has ended, and making space for the truth and renewal. Okay? But again, if you're using the shadow, it could be about forced endings, a loss of standing, being buried by the consequences, and a refusal to accept that something is over. Okay? Now, I threw, and here we go. Okay, so Jacobs and Dionysus. Okay, this is a real picture. Okay, so the picture that I used was, I used Jacob conjuncting Dionysus. Okay, Dionysus or whatever. I used Jupiter, Pluto equals Apollon equals Jupiter equals Chiron. We've already been through that. We've already been through the sun, moon equals, this was the stuff from the 90-degree dial, equals midheaven Poseidon, which equals Uranus. So it's, truth and awakening, public rupture, which increases our healing, and it's about fraud and intoxication. The con collapses. The illusion dies. At least it's starting to. It'll be completely dead, I think, by February 17th. The figure or role loses power. The story moves to its ending phase. So that's one of the decline. So again, point of no return. It's basically not an accidental confusion. It's ultimately all engineered, which you're going to figure out. So basically, it's the face of deception, the scam artist, the emotional or spiritual manipulation, okay, and cult-like dynamics. And again, how fraud masks as inspiration or healing, but it's technically fraud, okay? And it's, you keep it basically a recognizable individual or role that embodies deception, intoxication, emotional manipulative energy, using charisma, ecstasy, or emotional release to deceive, exploit, or destabilize others. Boy, I don't even have to describe who that would be on the macro. I think we can all figure that out. It basically is telling us that the truth, the awakening, and the exposure is on its way. And when it's exposed, it's not glorified. Okay? So I'm going to leave you there with that. If you want to comment on especially the AI stuff and how you felt about it. And in the meantime, I'm going to end this as I always do because I know it ran way over, that I wish you all only happy readings. Until we meet again.